The FNRad Snowboard Podcast is presented by Vans. Season 8 of FNRad is sponsored by Wired Snowboards, Anon Optics, the Boardroom Snowboard Shop, FindAnEpicAgent.com, and Tribute Board Shop in Nelson, BC. The Boardroom Snowboard Shop offers the greatest selection of the highest quality snowboards and everything you need to go snowboarding with the most knowledgeable staff at the guaranteed best price. The Boardroom's performance guarantee makes sure your snowboarding gear works the way you want it to out there on the snow, and the stores are stocked with snowboards, boots, bindings, outerwear, goggles, gloves, accessories. So drop by the West 4th Vancouver location, the Lonsdale location in North Vancouver, or go to boardroomshop.com and check out their new website to order quality goods from a quality company. The Boardroom Snowboard Shop for all your snowboarding needs. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can watch the show in 4K high definition in the comfort of your home or anywhere you bring your phone. Support also comes from Dakine, Mount Seymour, Grouse Mountain, Pro Standard GoPro accessories, and Volcom outerwear. Special thanks this episode to Beneath, ThisPlaceIsAwesome.net, Skull Skates in Qualicum Beach, home to the Pop Culture Museum, and Tomahawk Indigenous Products. PD is a snowboarding pioneer whose contributions in the 80s and 90s will be highlighted in this episode. PD started Crystal Ocean Snowboards and is the guy behind Skull Skates. His Pop Culture Museum in Qualicum Beach is featuring the Vintage Snoboard Show, and it's a must-see for board collectors, snowboard nostalgia junkies, and any snowboarder who wants to see amazing examples of the boards that shaped our culture. The museum is interesting for absolutely everybody, so if you're going to be on Vancouver Island this season, make sure you go see the Vintage Snowboard Show in Qualicum. I've been after PD to do an interview for years, so it was an honor to finally sit down with him and talk snowboarding.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason that we haven't talked sooner is I guess I wasn't sort of ready, and now having this here, it all kind of makes a little bit more sense.
There's a lot of pieces here that just show the depth of how entwined in snowboarding you were.
Yeah.
And how early. That's the big thing. I didn't have any early touchstones because, like I said with skateboarding last night, we weren't looking back a lot.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of looking back.
Yeah,
so like even Terry Kidwell, like that TK was a board that I looked at when it was in line and was like, do I want this? Do I want... And like, you know, there were other boards that were just way more modern at that point.
Yeah.
So like, I didn't know who Terry Kidwell was. You know, I've been slapped for that. People are like, shame on you, dude.
Icon in snowboarding. There's certain names that people just know because they were heavily promoted on a commercial basis. And then there are other people that people in the know were aware of. And if you weren't sort of deep into it like us fiends, you wouldn't. I mean, but to me, Terry Kedwell's a pretty major name. But I feel you, man. You're not going to know everything all the time. As far as our connection to snowboarding, I mean, people have an awareness that maybe we did Crystal Ocean and Skull Skates Snowboards, but you're right. For the most part, I don't think people understand how far back we go with stuff. And it's not just snowboards. It's well, skateboards obviously, but like BMX bikes and skimboards and cruiser bikes, which would eventually become mountain bikes. And we kind of have been on the forefront of a lot of stuff, not because we're anything special or different other than the stoke.
It's passion, right?
The stoke is what brings us to these things, yeah. Yeah,
well, I mean, when I aligned myself with Vans as a sponsor, Doug Palladini was there, and I'm like, you know, hey, Doug, you used to run Snowboarder. Let's do an interview. And through that interview, I realized, you know, Vans put themselves out of business because there was a greedy uncle, and he was like, we should be competing against Nike. And it's a story they tell about figuring out what works, and what works is authenticity. They do have that Tony Alva,
oh yeah, they
Stacey
understand.
Peralta.
They're smart. It's like the bogus shoe company that tried to come in. I mean, you know, there's if you really care that much about commerce and your concerns are monetary primarily, you'll find a way in. You know, that big crappy brand tried the first time and everybody kicked their asses out. So then they just came back in and started hiring team managers and design people from inside the industry. And they basically circumvented the thing, came in the side door.
Yes.
So, you know, I won't even mention them, but we know who they are.
Absolutely.
And it's like, money is this sort of pervasive, it festers. Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. How far back does that philosophy go? Like, you quit high school with your parents in the room with the guidance counselor saying,
Yeah.
I'm going to run a shop. I don't have any need for the shit that you
That was
you're
just based
teaching
on
me.
an opportunity. It wasn't me trying to be like I knew any better than the people I was going to school with. It just, my overall feeling was that I was learning a lot more in the real world. That was the start of it. It felt like there was a lot more to be learned in the real world than through the textbooks and the curriculum. And then on top of that, just this opportunity fell in my lap, and it seemed ridiculous to pass it up.
Where was the shop at that point?
Well, the shop originally was a mail order run out of my bedroom in my parents' home in Nanaimo.
Rad.
Yeah, and that lasted from like 76 till 78, I think.
Okay.
And then it's all a little bit funny because there's been a lot of bouncing around. And so, for example, Skull Skate started as Great North Country Skateboards, morphed into GNC Skates, morphed into Skull Skates. That officially started in Regina. And the reason being is that my family was from Saskatchewan. We were already located in Nanaimo. My brother, through a different business opportunity, ended up back in Regina. So I'd go back for summer holiday, a couple months, and hang out with him. And we set up a skate shop there, the first physical skate shop that wasn't run out of my bedroom.
Was that probably the first skate shop in Canada? Not that matters.
No, I don't know. I don't think it was the first.
Yeah.
We now claim the oldest, only because we were definitely aware that there was an older shop, a place called Freewheelin' in Calgary, and they had predated us by probably 6 or 8 months.
Oh, wow.
But they unfortunately don't exist anymore. And so at that point, we obviously had to jump in and claim oldest skateboard shop. But I don't think we were the first. There's a place, there were a few early people selling skateboards, but they weren't skateboard shops. It was, you know, a ski shop
The
or
DeMarco
something
Sports
other,
or something.
whatever it is.
Yeah,
There's a place called Muckamuckai in West Van that I think was probably a good solid year or so before us. What was the place out in Burnaby? Anyway, originally it was more just like place that sold skis and other sporting equipment, and they got wind of skateboarding's this hot thing. But I guess I can't say we were the first, but we were one of the early skateboard specific shops.
Rad.
Yeah.
How far into it, like, what is the first hint of snowboarding? It seems like you had a snurfer growing up.
Well, no, Snurfer was 1979.
Okay.
So I don't know where my brother, who was 10 years my elder, and that's why this opportunity came up when I was a high school kid, was because at that time I was not old enough to sign a lease for to do business.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm sure I would have been capable, and I eventually did become capable, but your average person wouldn't take a teenager serious with that kind of stuff, and I think there's probably even some kind of legal ramifications to having a minor sign a lease. Anyway, snowboards came up because my brother, who was originally part of the business, I have no idea where they came from. Just one day this box showed up with a bunch of snurfers in it, and that was 1979. And I have a very clear recollection of a pretty legendary skateboarder from Vancouver named Carlos Longo, along with his brother Lionel, probably Porridge Man, bunch of East Van, original East Van. I'm not an East Van guy, I'll never claim being from East Van, but that was, in the 70s, that was the center of hardcore skateboarding in Western Canada, was East Vancouver. And so they just all became my homeboys only because we just all had that same, foamy at the mouth stoke for it.
Was it Jack's at that point, or was it
Jack's
just?
hadn't really materialized yet.
Yeah.
Jack's was not too far down the road.
Yeah. Is that
but
center?
those guys would become, several of them would become Jack's members.
Is that center around that China Creek area, or is it just street skating and everything?
Yeah, no, I think Jack's started in San Francisco, and then from there, other chapters began to be developed, including the Vancouver chapter and several others. And I'm guessing, I don't know, Vancouver chapter, those guys would be able to tell you better, but maybe 82 or something like that.
I remember seeing thrashing. That's something that I...
Let's come back to thrashing, can we?
Yes,
absolutely. I want to
absolutely.
finish my point about the first time on a snowboard.
Yes,
Sorry
please.
to jump on you. But
No, thank you. Thanks.
No, I
Keep
have
me
a
on
very
that.
clear recollection of we took these snurfers out.
Yes.
And we went to Central Park in Burnaby. I don't know if any of the viewers know Central Park in Burnaby, but it's just this large kind of rambling park out there, and it had some little hills.
Yeah.
So we got a dump in the city. We had been spending a lot of time in Burnaby because that's where the Skateboard Palace was, an indoor concrete park in Burnaby that operated in the late 70s. Yeah. And so, anyway, I have clear recollection of us all trying to ride these things, jumping on them, and just getting bucked, and just like, this is not a skateboard, they don't steer. I mean, we understood the concept of this thing's moving and you have to stay on it, because being from skateboarding, but we just couldn't figure out how the hell to maneuver it, with the exception of Carlos Longo, who always has had this incredible talent to skate. Yeah, I clearly remember him just getting on the thing and just flying on it, and not only that, but like in his first or second run, just doing full-on extended laybacks on it and coming out of it totally with speed, and we're just like, oh my God.
Wow.
Yeah, and we had some really, there's a board that I wish I had kept. It's no longer in my possession, but it was a flight snowboard. Where were they out of Rochester or something?
East Coast, for
Yeah.
sure. Rhode Island, maybe?
Rhode Island, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a really neat, had a sort of a V-bottom with these rails that turned down, laminated like a skateboard, staples in the top, much like the Snurfers, except that it was bigger and more maneuverable.
Rad.
And I think that's probably the second snowboard that I ever rode.
Do you know where that one came from? Was that a...
Well, it just would have been a connection through, in those days, there have always been people in Canada going pretty far back in skateboarding and snowboarding that have had some kind of input as far as putting out product and designing things. But
Yes.
truthfully, in the early days, the majority of the stuff was coming from stateside,
Yeah, yeah.
That's where the population was, and that's where, I guess it was easier to put things into production. And
Right.
so I guess that probably, again, part of this would have been, or all of it, in fact, would have probably been my brother's doing, because he just had this foresight that snowboarding would be a thing someday.
He actually...
Yeah, he didn't physically do it himself, but he understood that this was something coming down the line.
Wow.
And so yeah, he would have ordered the Snurfers, he would have ordered, I think it was just a sample or a one-off, whatever, of that flight board. That eventually led to us becoming a Burton dealer around, I don't know, what year did this board come out, do you know?
Jeez,
It's the first year with bindings, because the one before didn't have bindings.
might
right?
be 83 or 82.
Whatever year
Yeah.
that was.
Yeah.
That was, we went from Snurfers to this sort of flight prototype to Burtons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you were selling them in Vancouver. Was there a market?
Oh, it was ridiculous. Nobody knew what snowboards were. They'd come into our shop because they wanted a kick-ass skateboard or a high-end BMX bike, which you couldn't get BMX bikes anywhere. That was the other thing too. Like bike shops, we probably carried high-end BMX shit for like 4 years before a bike shop even knew what it was.
Wow.
And again, it's not that it's just this stoke. Everything that brought us to being so-called innovators or whatever that was not our intention. It was just, wow, this is rad. Nobody else is doing this. To just backtrack quickly, the shop out of my bedroom started because my brother had an iron-on transfer. Back in the day, you'd go to the mall and they'd have all these graphics on display, and you'd pick one, and you'd pick the kind of baseball shirt and the colors you'd like, and they'd iron the thing on, you know?
I had several.
So he was in that business. And because he was in that business, he took several trips annually to California to get the fresh. Roach was a big brand.
Rad.
Crazy David was a big brand, who's this old school hippie cat. Anyway, get to the point. My brother introduced me to skateboarding in Nanaimo right around when the urethane wheel came out. And as we all got stoked, we all were hungry, not just me, but my buddies that I had hooked up with. We started getting lists. I'd make lists for my brother. Hey man, get me some OJ wheels, you know, give me some Bennett trucks or something.
Yeah.
And then it turned into my friends would be like, oh man, would you mind, do you think he could pick up some trackers for me?
Right.
And some road riders, and man, I would love to get one of those Logan Earth ski boards.
I'm excited just hearing the names, because how fun it was to get something from California was insane.
It was nuts. It was like it was imported from another planet, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
And anyhow, so that's what it was. So then a light kind of came on over our heads, like, oh, people want this stuff and you can't get it in Canada.
Yeah.
We could probably sell this stuff in Canada, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where that came from. And then I guess the snowboard thing was a little bit more, there wasn't a demand, but again, there was this idea that there could be if you cultivated it. You know?
Mm-hmm.
So early days of selling, back to your question, was people didn't just come in and buy a snowboard. They came in for a BMX bike or a skateboard, and they'd be like, what are those things? Oh, dude, those are for on snow. You should try it. Yeah, I'll maybe try it. I'm like, well, we're going up on Saturday to hike at Cypress or hike at Seymour. Why don't you come? We'll let you try it. That was the only way you could sell a snowboard. Right. Nobody came in the door going, I want a snowboard.
Right.
Yeah, so there's a little story about how Crystal Ocean Snowboards or skull skates, which is basically the same thing, except at a certain point they split into two lines. But how it got started was we were repping Burton, and we were repping them pretty hard. And yeah, we're taking people up and demoing them, and it was a lot of effort. You couldn't just go, this is what this does, and do you want to buy it? And then they'd buy it. You actually had to go up the hill with them, and you know, it was a big deal to just sell a board, one board.
And then the board retails at like $200 or something.
Which is an insane amount of money at that time.
Yeah, yeah.
And so people are not going to cough up $200 for something they don't even know what it is,
Mm-hmm.
let alone they don't even know if they can ride it yet, or if it's a functional thing. Anyhow, the year that Hurton came out with the P-Tex base metal edge, I guess it's the Elite or something. Here we are, like several years in, couple three, whatever it is. We're out there just repping the shit out of it and we weren't thinking this is a brand of a snowboard. We were just thinking that's one we can get. We did Sims too. This one with the broken off tail is my original rider.
Oof.
And we all broke off tails because you'd accidentally spin into a 180 and then you'd dig the half of the swallowtail and it would just snap. But anyway, point being, the year the Elites came out, some donkey windsurf shop got their order before we got our order, because you know they ordered 36 boards instead of we ordered 12 or 20 or whatever.
Were they a dealer before that year?
No.
So you're building.
They just came in
with
the bullshit,
right?
And then, you know, Nucky Chucks down in Vermont or wherever they were, I guess Vermont. Yeah, they kicked us to the curb. So I just went, oh my God. These guys sucks. There's no loyalty here. They don't give a shit. They don't know that, and if they do know, they don't care that we've been, what it takes to sell one of these things to somebody, you know?
Yeah, there's not a rep going around picking shops.
There was nothing, dude.
You called on your own.
And when I say repping, I don't mean as a sales rep. I mean as a fucking representative of snowboarding.
Building the
it
sport.
It just so happened that was the brand that we could get.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the light came over our heads like, oh, we can't trust these dudes. They just clotheslined us when we've been doing all this shit for them. So we realized we got to create our own supply or we're screwed here.
Mm-hmm.
And in some way, I suppose I could thank Hurton for like kind of forcing our hand to start making snowboards. Because otherwise, I imagine we probably would have, only because somewhere down the line we probably would have thought we could have designed something more functional.
Well, there's so much innovation going on, right?
Yeah.
Right. Once you lock in to a board line, I mean, you're like, okay, well, some
What's
innovation
next? How do we do
happens.
it? Yeah, and every time you're riding, you're
stuck.
you're like,
yeah,
that works, that doesn't work.
Totally.
And that's how we started. That's how Skull Skate started too. Is that we had eventually been importing these primarily American brands. And I just started thinking to myself, man, if this board had a little bit shorter wheelbase or longer wheelbase, or if it was slightly wider, or if it tapered a little bit sooner, or was a little bit more blunt here, or the tail was a bit more square. Skull Skates didn't start, GNC, Great North Country, none of that started because we thought, oh crap, we could make a bunch of money making this stuff.
Exactly.
It was more like, I want to ride something that's more functional. That was the motivation.
yeah, yeah.
In the case of the snowboards, it was more like this weird businessy thing where we're just like, we need to dial in our own supply or we're screwed, right?
What was the first Crystal Oceans? Is that the?
It's this one right here in the corner.
Oh yeah. I'm looking right at it.
1983. And,
It's got that kind of Sims / Chuck Barfoot Sims era vibe to it.
Because I don't think we were really, I guess we would have been aware of Chuck stuff for sure. We'd never seen one in person, but we were aware of, Chuck's the man to this day.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and if you weren't aware of Chuck, you weren't snowboarding,
I love the bindings. Those bindings. Did you come up with those, or were those something that you ordered?
No, everything's made from scratch there. I bought 2 boards existed that year. The first year it was basically 2 prototypes were made, so nothing was sold for sale that year.
Right.
But what happened was that we contacted this company in San Diego. It's like a laminating company. They make skateboards and stuff. And we said, hey, we're in Canada. We want to start producing boards. Can you kick us down or sell us, whatever it was, a couple unshaped panels so that we can prototype?
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, if you've ever seen an unshaped panel, it's just a big rectangle, and you figure out what you want to do with it. And so I had some influence from riding that round-tail Burton. I had some influence from riding that Sims Swallowtail. They call it the Pro model. Not then, I guess it eventually became the 1400 FE or something.
Yeah, the FE series. Yeah.
And
that one has no edges, right? Like that's
yeah,
pre-edge.
and even though the tail snapped off, that's why I thought it would be cool to have it in this exhibit. Just
Absolutely, it's
It's pre-metal edge.
I think also the tail snapped off. Like that's the way the tail snapped.
Yeah.
The
tail's
it's a part of
probably
history.
somewhere still rotting on Cyprus, I would imagine. But no, as far as the bindings go, it's that thing. It's like, okay, the first thing was we got to figure out our own supply. And then the next thing was, well, of course, if you're going to make something, you don't just make a replication of something somebody's already done.
No.
If you're going to put the effort in to make something, you should be upgrading the design, make it more functional. The bindings are quite interesting. Whereas some of the brands were doing just a rubber strap on the back and the kind of that front banding on that board is essentially coming out of water skiing.
Mm-hmm.
And so our idea was, well, that makes sense, but what if you could stuff yourself in the wide rubber bit and then pull up another strap up higher on your foot, and that seems like it would lock in better, which it did. It worked actually, they worked quite well. It wasn't like you were locked in by sort of modern binding standards, but it definitely was more functional than some of these other ones.
Well, watching that Barfoot 1982 Barfoot video that Chuck put together this morning, and I'm just going. It takes you a minute to realize, they're right. They're essentially pow surfing. Like
we were all ripping. That's the funny thing. Like that was, and that's the cool thing about when these things evolve. The assumption is that something just happened in this place because they got coverage.
Right.
But the reality is, and if you look around the room and see how things have evolved, most of these board manufacturers, unless they were like Tom and Jake, most people didn't really, and Chuck for that matter, they were aware of what each other was doing only because they were in the same. Well, Jake. Anyway, point being is that a lot of this stuff evolved simultaneously in different places without people knowing what other people were doing.
Pockets of completely insular scenes came up with the same thing. And when I saw those K-tail skis, I'm like, you went to fucking Utah in 79 to 81 to shred? And you're like, No, that's Hemlock. So you didn't tell me the story about Hemlock and the skis.
Yeah, the story of Hemlock is that, so initially we were banished. You know, they didn't want anything to do with us. Because it was new, it was different. And let's be honest, in less than perfect conditions, the boards weren't, that functional yet.
True.
We got beautiful conditions. You could shred. If anybody's seen that, and if you haven't, you should look at that 1982 Barfoot promo video.
It's incredible.
It's an eye-opener and a mind-blower.
Yeah.
And, but we were all, and I shouldn't claim that we were shredding as hard as those dudes, but we were pretty close to that level. I mean, everybody was just ripping. There was no reference. Everything was, like, there was a point when there were 8 snowboarders in the Lower Mainland, myself and 7 other people. And what get to the point is just that, yeah, they wouldn't let us on the hill. So I think at some point we had some talk about, man, this sucks. We're going and we're hiking for 7.5 hours to get 30 minutes worth of runs in.
Right.
Which is, it's rad. Hey man, go hike in the back country. It's rad. But like, if that's all you have, and you see these chairs rattling over your shoulder, you're like, wouldn't it be nice to be on one of those, So, and there were little stories, one year somebody hiked up past the first chair and somehow snuck on to the second chair up at Whistler or wherever it was. And so there were little blips of things, but it was still completely outcast. And we get on the phone one day and put on our most professional phone voice, and we start calling the resorts up around the BC coast and started asking them, do you allow snowboards? To which they all said no. And then we'd ask why, to which they all just hung up on us, except Hemlock Valley. Well, Hemlock Valley is, I guess you would call it the valley region that's sort of outside of Vancouver. They were the only ones that actually humored us and said, well, yeah, we can't let you up because our liability insurance is such that it specifies people need to load and unload wearing skis off the lift. And so we said, okay, well, if we were to load and unload off the lift using skis but carry our board in our arms, would you allow that? And a little hesitation, and the dude on the line was like, yeah, that'd be cool. Wow. We were like, bing, it was like trying to like not act too excited, but like, okay, what days are you open? I think they were only open weekends then, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Anyhow, super slider snow skates. I remember the ads from being a little ass kid, and it was like, they're ridiculous. They're these little, they're plastic slippers.
Yeah.
That you walk around on snow on. But the ads were like, skate, slide, soar. The only soar is, it should be S-O-R-E, not S-O-A-R. Anyhow, because you just, they didn't work. But
yeah,
what happened was we showed up and we said, hey, these are skis, right? And they kind of were like, but then we sort of pulled out some cash and went, these are skis, right?
Yeah.
And Hemlock, I don't know if it is now, but in those days it was not a very busy place. Is Hemlock still around?
It is. It's changed hands in the last few years,
right.
But it was...
In the day, anyway, they could use the dough. They needed it. Whereas everyone else is like, get lost, you clowns, So, yeah, they kind of, with a little hesitation, and we probably said something like, we just drove all the way from Vancouver, or whatever happened. So they're like, yeah, why not? So they sold us a pass. It was a mind blower. I mean, to all of a sudden be on the chair, and I remember the first time we went, it was beautiful, freshies and just nobody around, tons of terrain to shred. Anyway, we'd get on and on. We'd walk, kind of trudge along with our boards in the lineup on these little plastic skis, and then when we get off at the top, we'd kind of stumble down on the things, and then we'd all have these little light backpacks that we got, like tiny little sort of military things, and then we'd just chuck the snow skates in there. Boom, we're snowboarding.
Unreal.
On a chairlift. Insane. So that's 83, same year as that board came out.
So did you guys go every weekend that you could, or was it like something you did a couple of times?
Yeah, it was, and it was a ways off before Do we know what year, like Seymour, was it 88 or something, or 89? I don't even know.
I think it went Cypress,
Cypress. In Cypress,
Grouse,
you had to get
Whistler,
certified.
Seymour.
Yeah, you had a certification. They had a
Right.
certification program.
Right.
You had to prove that you weren't a knob, and then they'd sell you a pass. And which for some of us took a lot of effort. Anyhow, no, they wanted you to be reasonably proficient so that you weren't chopping down skiers all over the place.
That was the main focus, was the ability to stop.
Yeah, control your board.
Yep.
But what was that, 88, 89, something like that?
It could have been 87, probably
Could have been
88, 89.
Anyway, several
Yes.
years
Yeah.
after
5
Hemlock.
years. Like,
Yeah, and Hemlock was like the best kept secret too. I mean, between me and my few friends, we never saw anybody else snowboarding out there.
I saw it in the magazines in 1992 around when I was moving out here, and I had no reference for anything.
It would have just been us. Yeah.
Yeah.
It would have just been us.
It was dope. I mean, I've been there a bunch. I've catboarded down the backside of it.
We used to think there's a cornice there, and you probably even have. We used to say it was 30 feet. It was probably more like 10, but it felt like 30 on a little board.
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But that was the shit. I mean, I remember we'd sort of traverse along this ridge, and we'd get to this thing, and we'd just leap off the thing. And man, when you'd punch that landing and come riding off with the speed, it was like your brain was just on fire.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Yeah. They had that ridgeline that went all along, and it got really steep on the looker's left. Like,
yeah.
And they had a whale back. That's what we went for. There was like a run. If you bombed the whole run, you could just air over this.
Yeah.
We called it a whale.
I remember a
so
cornice
fun.
that I don't think showed up all the time. They had to have a pretty big season and a pretty good one-time dump to really make it work.
Rad.
And it might have been even more than 10. It probably wasn't 30 though, but it was big for us then, you know.
Yeah, I can remember because I moved out west during the era of
Where are you
extreme.
from? Where did you move from?
I moved from northern Ontario.
Oh, okay, cool.
But I grew up in
So
a
you guys
really
tons of snow there too.
Tons of snow, not any scene.
Right.
It's the early 90s, and it's like I thought we were going to move
Conditions
up.
are what? Freshies or more packed and ice? Or?
It would snow in November, December,
And then the rest of the year
The
you'd
rest
be
of the year,
on-
it's just all
whatever's laying
sun. But the thing is, you would just go to you go to the hill, and then you track that. You go the next run over. And it's fresh. We were always riding fresh.
Yeah, cool.
But it was
You
like
had to. I mean,
so short. Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it's super fun. So yeah, I remember the big drop era just being like, boards got really long, and you were looking for things, and then we got exposed to Hawaii.
Right.
So like Hawaiian, we kind of wanted to do that for Canada. Like, you call it a 30-foot cliff in California, but that's like 10-foot Canadian.
That's why I'm trying careful not to make too many ridiculous claims.
Yeah. But so there was no exposure to the thing that had happened at Aspen in Colorado.
No.
It just.
What did you tell me about that yesterday or something?
Yep. Yeah. So they
That's
had
the first time I've learned about it.
It was the exact same situation that it was a liability thing.
Yep.
If you get on and off the lift with skis, and they had the backpacks, the whole thing.
Yeah.
The guy who told me about it, works in marketing at Brighton probably right now.
Okay.
Or no, sorry, Snowboard. And he was so excited.
I love that because it's a perfect example of just what we were saying about there were things, people were in these little sort of bubble vacuums, and yet roughly the evolution was taking place at the same kind of pace from one spot to the next, even though there was no communication, there was no internet, there was no magazines, there was nothing.
It was innovation out of Stoke.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've had John Buffrey and Cowboy from Utah, who coincidentally both became like major avalanche control guys.
Right.
And they both invented split boarding.
Cool.
And on their behalf, their friends are like, no, Cowboy invented it in 1990.
Right.
No, Buffrey invented it in
yeah,
89. And it's the Jeff Grell, Louis Forno thing too, about the high back. Like, he saw my high back. I didn't see his fucking high back.
Yeah, there it is.
But at the time,
and that all makes sense. I mean, for sure, there was some biting. There always is. But
absolutely,
there sincerely are things that that's how things evolve, and that goes way beyond snowboarding. Obviously, I mean, you look at humans and the kind of endeavors we get into, and there's just something kind of magical about how things unfold, and other people don't need to necessarily be aware of what those others are doing in order for it to all happen simultaneously.
Right, and the amount of caring depends on the personality, right? Like, so some people really, really care. Chuck Barfoot really cares.
Yeah.
When his team riders went to Burton, that broke his heart.
Yeah, Chuck's the man. We all love Chuck. I mean, again, like I said, if you don't know what's up with Chuck, you need to figure that out, because he's the dude.
Absolutely.
He's not, you know, and I think there's, for my own personal taste, I love someone like Chuck because I've just drawn to the underdog, man. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even so much that he was an underdog, but he wasn't in it for monetary. His trip was not about money. His trip was about stoke, you know? And still is to this day if you talk to him. He's like one of the happiest, life-loving dudes that I know, you know?
I think we worship the extroverts.
Right.
Right? So, like, if you're a boastful, flamboyant guy, you're going to get a lot more attention. Whereas if you're an introvert and you're like, hey, I think this would work better.
Yeah.
You're an innovator,
Yeah.
not the boastful guy a lot of the time. The boastful guy is like Tom going back to his garage, making a fake board and coming back and going, I invented snowboarding. Right. That's a boastful
Tom's
guy.
A special case.
Yes.
I mean, and, you know, no disrespect to Tom, man. I was there at that event. Everybody's heard the story who's connected to snowboarding and the history.
Yep.
You know, Freshies, Donner, was it Donner or Boreal? Can't remember, one of those.
Soda Springs, maybe?
Soda Springs, that's what it was. Anyway, yeah, we wake up in the morning, it's Bluebird with Freshies. Tom shreds the face, sets all the gates on his line, enters and wins his own contest, and then he's world champion snowboarder in his next brochure. But you know what? I didn't. Maybe people resented him for it. We all just went, it's Tom.
Yeah.
You know, it's like my quick story of that my personal story of that event was that, well, first of all, we got elevation sickness. We thought we had food poisoning. We snowboarded local hills. Local hills are close to the ocean.
Sea level.
Yeah. And all of a sudden what is Soda Springs?
Oh,
like
it's up there.
6,000 feet or
yeah,
something?
it's up there. Base elevation 6,000 or 7,000 feet.
Yeah. So it's like I didn't know what that was, you know. And like I said, we thought we ate something funky. And I'm not making excuses, I'm just saying we were out of sorts. And so, and add to that, shit, I'd never been to a snowboard competition. We just hung out with each other and snowboarded. I think I rode that board in the competition. And I remember it was covered with Crystal Ocean stickers, the whole thing. And Tom, at some point, looked down at the thing and totally bagged me out because I had put my stickers all over it. Yeah, but it's still your board. I still bought your board. I'm still riding your board. Anyway, get to amazing. The point, it's this... What was considered a half pipe in those days was pretty comical, but it was these sort of lumps of snow piled up on either side, and there'd be one. Everybody had to take the same line. There was only one line through. Yeah. And because that was where the rut was, and that's where the hit is, and that's where you go. So we're in practice or whatever. We're just goofing around, and now it's either the next day or several hours later in the day, whatever it is. And it's gotten cold on the hill, and everything's really icy and fast. But me having no experience and just being clueless about anything like conditions or elevation or any of that crap. So I roll in on the first hit, which everybody's hitting that same hit. It's front side for me. I didn't know it, but I guess I'm doing about 3 times the speed that I had been prior. Yeah. In the air, right? I'm in the air, just way too high and way too upside down, and all I can hear is the whole crowd. It's like time froze, and I can hear everybody going, "Whoa," like this, right? And then I wake up face down in the bottom of the pipe with Tom standing on the lip yelling at people down gathered around me, "Don't touch him, he might be paralyzed." I wake up, I got a softball growing on my forehead, right? And no on-site, no on-site first aid or ski patrol or anything. You guys snowboarders are on, you clowns are on your own, right? So anyway, I wake up, or, I come to, and I'm kind of trying to shake it off, and I'm all sketched because now I've just concussed myself and I got elevation sickness. I remember riding by myself. I'm just, the contest is sort of fading in the background. I'm trying to carve down the hill and kind of focus, and everything's blurry and fuzzy and wavy and moving. I go to the lifeguard, or to the ski patrol shack, and I'm like, hey man, I just smacked my head. You got anything? Yeah. They give me a hit of oxygen. Like everything just snapped clear. And then that's when I realized, oh shit, I totally had elevation. I mean, then we learned from other people, like, oh yeah, no, that's not food poisoning, dude.
Yeah, I had it twice.
Thin air
it sucks.
Shit. Yeah.
Utah and just at Mount Hood.
Yeah.
We were camping at elevation, Mount Hood. You couldn't walk like 3 steps.
Yeah. It's a peculiar thing.
What the hell is going on? Feel like you have food poisoning, right?
I also remember getting off the bus in, was it Truckee? I don't know where you... Sorry, all this stuff kind of blurs together.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I do remember getting off a bus from L.A. and we were dressed like we were still in L.A. And all of a sudden we get off the bus and we're like, oh my God, I think we had like windbreakers on or something. You know what I mean? That was our snow gear at that time. And I don't know if we had blue jeans or what, but I remember just thinking, oh my God, we don't have the right clothing for this climate. This is crazy.
Yeah. You were a traveler, even that. So when that starts with your brother, does he take you to California ever?
Yeah, I'm living in LA at that point, I guess.
Yeah.
Because maybe this board's from 82. I always say 83. But anyway, because I did live in Los Angeles, because I shaped that board in Vancouver.
Okay.
But I lived in Los Angeles, and it could have been, maybe I did this early in 83, and by later in the year I was living in LA, because I lived in Los Angeles from 83 to 88 or 89.
Oh, wow.
But because now I had transplanted there and we were aware of snowboarding, we'd go to, what's the mountain that's close to LA? Big Bear? No, not Big Bear. There's something. That is,
I know the one you're talking about.
There's something that's...
John Boyer talks about it. Yeah.
It's a small resort and it's not that far away.
Let's not blow it up. People don't...
Yeah, whatever it is.
It's really
whatever
good.
it is, we were like already snowboarding, and
Yeah.
now I'm in LA and like, oh yeah, of course we're going to go snowboarding.
Yeah.
Although we couldn't go as much because spots weren't as close to get to.
That one's an hour or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like an hour and 10 minutes from Hollywood.
Yeah.
Boyer still rides there now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, it's funny too. I remember shredding there one day. We were sponsoring Stephen Olson and David Hackett through skateboarding.
Rad.
Legendary skateboarder fellows. And I got the name of that. We won't say it, but I've got the name of that resort on the tip.
I think I know it too.
Yeah, let's not say it. That secret spot. I remember shredding below the chair and just hearing somebody yell my name and looking up and seeing Olson and Hackett. I didn't even know they were going to be on the mountain that day.
Amazing.
Anyway, just funny little memories like that, yeah.
That feeling of 80s snowboarding, and I think I started in 87 or 88, but that feeling that every snowboarder on the mountain was just like, yeah, let's meet up and crew up. Because
it's like skateboarding still is to this day. If you see someone with a skateboard, that's your family. Mm-hmm. You know.
Yeah.
And nobody likes all their family members, but bottom line is your family, whether you like it or not.
I always joke about that with my buddy, like a restaurant that says we treat you like family.
Yeah.
They should be like, get the hell in the kitchen and start helping out. What are you doing here? You just sit there?
Dishes need washing, man. What's your problem?
Yeah. It is a family. It is. So you straddle both worlds. You are in the legit skateboard world.
Yeah.
And when I say legit, like growing up a Canadian snowboarder, Canada is a kind of secondary market to the States. So if you're on the Canadian distributor team, it's not
primarily just due to the lack of population.
Right.
That's what it all came down to. Yeah.
But was there a humongous difference between the snowboard community and the skateboard community, or was there a lot of cross-pollination there?
I mean, people who skated snowboarded and vice versa, but really, like if you look at this is Snowboarder magazine. Yep. And I don't know if you can catch that, but that's Caballero. That's Steve Caballero on the cover. That's the board he's riding right there, the ski board. And in that issue, I'm pretty sure I know there's a sequence of him doing a wall ride, which is some pretty early jibbing. Yeah. Oh, but wow. Also Lance Mountain. Yeah, it was all. I mean, that's what skateboarders are, just that way. We've got so much percolating energy that it's hard to contain it in one thing. And so a lot of us, I got heavy into BMXing, I got heavy into the snowboard deal. Because as a skater, you just, there's so many things that haven't even been invented, and there's so much opportunity just in skating. But once that energy starts going, you kind of start looking for, at least some of us start looking for some other places to put it,
Yeah.
Snowboarding just happened to be one of those places. But also, because of our climate in Canada, there's a bunch of time during the winter that skating is not very accessible. And so for us, the thing was, okay, well, let's go skate on the snow,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people laminated a skate deck with a crazy carpet or nailed shoes to it or whatever in the early days for us, for our generation.
Yeah, we did snurfers and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but it was the same idea. How do we skate when there's snow around?
So many of the guys that became the top pros would say the day that they strapped on a snowboard and could do every trick they'd ever wanted to do on a skateboard, it was just like, I'm hooked.
Yeah.
It's easy. It was easy. I don't think anyone ever argued that it was hard until, they started going to Alaska and started doing things that weren't.
And I've always had this little attitude that, no disrespect intended, but snowboarding is kind of skateboarding light.
Mm-hmm.
It's you're attached.
Yeah.
So right there, it's sort of it's a bit rollerblady. Let's just cut to the chase.
I was okay with skateboard light, but rollerblade is.
Sorry, man. You jump up, it's like, wee, I'm attached. Yippee! Like, come on, man.
Yeah, you can hop.
I'm obviously I'm being facetious because, we all know that there's a level in snowboarding where it's pretty intense. I mean, you reach some pretty incredible speeds. You're launching yourself off of some pretty big stuff. I was bad because I was one of those idiots that would love to tree ride, but I didn't like to ride with other people. I liked to ride by myself. So, I mean, some of those close calls, just weaving through trees at ridiculous rates of speed and coming really close to, doing myself in, and there would have been nobody around there because I didn't have anybody with me.
And you're outside of the patrollable boundary and all the things, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So I mean, in retrospect, it was a little bit crazy, but it's just what it was at the time.
I don't have a finger on the skateboard fatality pulse. I just don't. But coming into this, archiving the sport thing, talking with pro snowboarders, there's so much death in snowboarding.
You can die. You will die. That's the thing, and not just in snowboarding.
Is that in skateboarding as well? Because I know this.
I'm sure people die. I don't know I don't know the numbers.
Right.
Or the percentages or whatever. But it depends what kind of skateboarding you're talking about, I suppose.
It's gotten safer, right?
Well, and okay, are we talking about street skating where you're likely to die by trying to ride out a landing and getting hit by a vehicle?
Right.
Or are we talking downhill where it's more likely that you die by going too fast and going off the road or whatever?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, is that through the skate community that you've lost many of your legends to skateboarding?
A lot of skateboarders, and I guess you could say that about snowboarders, I don't like to use the word extreme, but it's the only one that seems to fit right now.
Lifestyle junkies, like living
skateboarding,
people.
And like I was saying earlier, once you become sort of somewhat proficient at skateboarding, you're like, what else could I shred on?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was riding BMX bikes in skateboard parks starting around 1980-ish, doing some pretty sizable transfers and airs and tabletops. Helmet? No. Why would you have a helmet? And now I think, man, if I had a case done, one line that I really used to like at Sailin' Bowl, which is the old snake run with the bowl at the bottom, I used to float a nice big air off the last hip into the bowl.
Rad.
And it was a beautiful move and it felt great, but man, I think about it now, man, if I had a cased on the landing,
to flat,
see you later. I would have just been dead, or
catch the lip and bounce. Yeah, you're toast.
Straw for the rest of my life. Or
right.
Whatever. So, but we didn't think about that, man. There's this kind of retarded, un-PC word, invincibility. That it's a funny thing because without confidence you'll achieve nothing. But there's this little and too much confidence, you're done too. But there's this little trap, and it's not, I don't think it's necessarily overconfidence, but it's this weird little invincible thing that somehow surfaces, you know?
For some people, or for myself personally, it happens when you get close to something you couldn't do before. Like where you go like, you know, if you get that thought in your head that I'm going to get hurt, then you're going to get hurt. But if there's this moment where you're like, get up, you're like, I'm not dead, I'm not hurt, like I'm close, I can do this. And I agree with you. It's not that you feel invincible, it's that you stop worrying about your safety.
Yeah, because you know it'll just get in the way of shredding.
Yes.
People that tend to be attracted to things like snowboarding and skateboarding and BMXing and skate parks and stuff, they like the edge. We like to know where the edge is, right? And so that means, well, if you want to find out where the edge is in life, there's a lot of different ways to research that, right? And so I always say that, you know, in any of these sort of pursuits, it's not about risk, it's about assessed risk. Right? Because risk is just chucking yourself off of shit and crossing your fingers. And that's, to me, is maybe not the best way to approach. And that's some people's process, and good on them, you know. But for myself, even at my most sort of feeling where the edge was moments, I always felt that I had done my diligence in some kind of proper assessment, you know, if that makes any sense.
It makes perfect sense.
And I think that's why I'm still riding a skateboard, and still, I don't ride bikes and bowls anymore, but I love to shred around busy urban centers at high speeds on cruiser bikes and do all kinds of fun stuff that some people would maybe consider risky for a 60-year-old dude. But I just think it's, why wouldn't you? I mean, why? Why would you put it down if you don't have to? And I'm not finished yet. That's the other part. Is I'll know when I'm finished, but it's not yet.
Yeah. I don't know whose quote it was. Maybe Phelps. That you don't quit skating because you're old. You get old because you quit skating.
Yeah, Jay Adams.
That's an Adams quote.
Yeah.
Rad.
Yeah.
Do you ever meet that guy?
Yep.
Incredible.
Yeah, amazing dude.
Incredible human being.
Yeah, he finished his life at this place where I used to go holiday. I'm not a surfer, but I go holiday in Puerto Escondido, which is Mex Pipe, and that's where Jay got his final rides. Yeah.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been there. It's awesome. It's one of the best places I've ever been. Yeah. Really amazing.
And just over the years, you know, I'm living in LA. I bump into him here and there. I had a good friend on the North Shore, Haleiwa, which is North Shore, Hawaii, and I bumped into Jay there one time.
Wow.
Riding a ramp, and just, he's a legendary dude. I mean, he's one of those dudes like, hey, I saw him somewhere. I think he might have looked at me somewhere. You know what I mean? He just, there's only one guy like that, you know, and he's the guy, in my opinion. We all love Tony Elva too. We loved all those guys.
TA,
But Jay was the guy where, I'm PD because of TA, you know, my nickname, which is the initials of my name.
Yeah.
You know, TA was Tony Elva, and I became PD, not by choice. But that's where it came from.
That's so amazing.
Quick Tony Elva story. So we used to, when I lived there, we used to hang out once in a while. I kind of semi-regular on a Sunday. I'd go pick him up when he was living in Santa Monica, and then we'd just go somewhere. We'd ride a pool, or we'd ride a ramp or something. But I can't remember where we were. We were somewhere in Orange County, and we get lit up by 5-0, and there's a few of us in the car, 4-5 skaters in the car. And the raddest thing is TA just turns around and says to everybody, can't remember, he was either driving or passenger front, and we're in the back. He just, okay, everybody, man, my name is Anthony Trask. Because I guess he had some priors or something. If anybody, we get separated and they start to, my name's Anthony Trask. I thought that was a great TA. I got another awesome TA story. So when the Dogtown Z-Boys, brilliant, you know, such a great film, and you know, genius, and changed the way people, especially kids, looked at skateboarding. But then there was the Hollywood one, right, which is and I had the discomfort of having gone to the screening of the Hollywood one at Whistler.
Oh wow!
And just kind of squeaming, wriggling in my seat, like, Get to the point, we arrive early, and that we know that the screening's at night, so we arrive early because we want to go shred the park a bit, Whistler Park, the OG Whistler Park.
Yep.
And so the raddest thing is, we show up at the park, there's TA just shredding by himself. And at that time, I guess Dogtown and Z-Boys had been out for a bit, but it hadn't become a full-on, so kids didn't know who TA was.
Right.
He's just ripping by himself, and there's all these kids oblivious. And we just roll up, oh, hey, Tony, what's up? And so I had these Alva Light Beam stickers. Alva Light Beam was this ill-designed board that didn't pan out, but I guess it's pretty collectible. The tail snapped off them, and they were like the Powell made a board called the Beamer. Anyway, I've got a bunch of old crap, including a pretty substantial vintage skateboard sticker collection. And the raddest thing is I see TA there, and we made this little card, congratulations on the movie, and, you're the man and all this shit. And I'm like, here, dude, I got a mint set of Alva Light Beam stickers for you, And I don't care, but they probably would have sold for a bunch of money, but who cares? I would never have sold them for a bunch of money. Anyway, I get to the point, man. I give them to TA. He's like, oh, cool, thanks. Sticks them on his board and just goes and does board slides and shit. I'm just like, it was rad because for like 30 seconds, I'm like, that dick. And then I instantly just went, man, I love that guy.
Yes.
He's the best. He gets it, man. Like, he gets that it's just stuff. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And, I love that about him because a good friend of mine, I think, once said that the thing about TA that was so rad is that he always sort of lived, and continues, I assume, lives life on his own terms, which is a pretty, people can talk about doing that, but actually doing it is something pretty unique, right?
There's a few people that stand out in snowboarding, skateboarding, that kind of don't get it. Sorry, Sean White, you just seem like a fucking guy that just is not a part of the community. Right. You're all about Sean.
Yeah.
And
well, that was TA when he was young too, though.
Yeah, you could see it in the movie that that the fame got to his head, of course.
And it was Hollywood, dude. Let's face it.
Yes.
Hollywood, there's a lot of stroking going on, and a lot of smoke being blown.
Yes.
And you listen to that shit long enough, you start to believe it, right?
Right.
So in a way, I'm not trying to defend how he was, but
right.
I understand that's why he was that way,
But
he grew through it like we do.
Of course. Yeah, there's a saying, don't meet your heroes, and I've been making fun of it for, 2 or 3 years, because the saying should be, don't idolize shitheads.
Yeah.
Because I've met a lot of my heroes, and I got to just tell you, like, in skateboarding and snowboarding, to a person, they're authentic, they're fucking awesome, and the stoke is the thing that you share.
Yeah.
I'm almost, I'm having a Hollywood moment where it's like, this is what gets stolen. You say the stoke is the thing, and someone goes, I've got a great idea. We're gonna write a movie, and the movie's gonna be about the guy's got the stoke, and someone's trying to steal it. It's like,
but that's Hollywood is. Yeah. It's like jerking off and not coming. What's the point? You know what I'm saying? You don't even start.
There's nothing of substance there. Right.
It is what it is, man. What are you gonna say about it? Like, it's that Dogtown and Z-Boys, and then it's like, okay, so someone makes an incredible, iconic, will last through the ages film. Yeah. And now someone else comes around and wants to make it better. Like, if that whole concept is so far-fetched and ridiculous and irrational in many ways. Yes. And yet they just can't help themselves somehow. Because what the second thing is inauthentic. Yeah. That's the point. It's posing. And that's their job. It's posing. And when you kicked me out of your shop. When did I kick you out of my shop? So we're talking 1993. By the way, at this point, the people that have been kicked out of my shop, there'd be a pretty long line. So yeah, that's epic. Don't feel too special, bro. I don't. Yeah, and I don't. I'm messing with you, dude. It's actually something that I brought to the community, being like, this guy's not going to make it. Like, you want to know why you kicked me out of the shop? Yeah, I'd be curious. I wanted to pay with a debit card. Oh, cool. So and then shut you down. You said no. And so I went across to the Chevron. Mm-hmm. I took out the money. I came back with the money, but I'd been so lippy. I'd said, like,
not a very
You were
viable
giving me
business
advice.
plan.
You give me unsolicited business advice. Yeah, that was your mistake.
You came back and you said, I don't even want your cash, bro. And I was like,
Yeah, you blew it.
now you're just being a dick. And you were like, there's the door.
Call me what you want.
Yeah.
You're out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I went back to
can't-
the
You
shop.
can't own this thing. So-
Right. And I went back to the shop and I was like, fuck, this guy's not even interested in someone who's a fan of his shit buying his stuff in his store.
That's a little bit offside, man. But, you know, what are you going to do?
It's not offside. It's dead on the money. It's authentic. I'm working at the Boardroom. I probably told you I'm working at the Boardroom. You're like,
Yeah, we
fuck, you
take
think?
debit cards.
Yeah. You think that fucking matters to me right now?
Yeah.
I'm
That's
like,
hilarious.
doesn't every single sale matter to you? You're like, nope. And I was like, it took me, probably only took me a year or two of telling it. And then I'd see in people's faces, like, don't badmouth PD. He's the fucking man, dude. You're talking about
I'm
skull
not the man,
skates
I'm
right
just some
now.
dude.
Yeah.
It's just a funny story. Okay, so we're sitting here in the Pop Culture Museum in Qualicum, which is an offshoot of our new operation here, our shop.
Beautiful shop.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. It's great. We're just so stoked. But just to be on point is like, yeah, I've got people telling me here, you know, you really should have better signs, and you really should have your Google. You know, it still says the old store that it's not even a skateboard shop when I search Google. And my thought is that, and I'm not trying to go out of my way to be a dick, man. Trust
Right.
me. It's just, this is skateboarding. If you can't find the spot, you can't skate it.
Yes.
And if you can't find the shop, you can't support it. And if you can't figure that out, and if I gotta, it's not my job to explain all this shit to you. You're either you're in or you're out.
Yes.
And so that's where Grandpa gets a bit grumpy, because I'm like, how the fuck did this become my responsibility to explain reality to you motherfuckers? Sorry, is cursing allowed on this thing or
Oh,
what?
fuck yeah.
Okay, so it's a frustrating thing, because it's like all I see is like, I don't know, maybe I'm the problem, but it's just like, yeah, this is not a corporate entity, man. This is a little hustle that I've been fortunate enough to develop. And trust me, I'm grateful for everybody who supports it, big or small. But don't try to get over on me. Don't try to give me advice I don't need. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Chip Wilson, right? West Beach, Lululemon.
Yes.
Nice enough, dude. Absolutely.
For
But
sure.
horseshoes up the ass.
Yeah.
You got lucky and you made a bunch of money.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't change you and me. You're still just that dude to me.
Right.
Right? But yeah, I bump into him somewhere. He's living in my neighborhood, and hey, PD, baby, do that. And we're just having a nice conversation. He's pushing a stroller with his kid. His wife's there. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, the goot starts to try and give me business advice. Motherfucker, I didn't ask you for business advice. What the hell are you talking about, right?
Right.
Your assumption that I somehow want to be a blown-out chump is incorrect. So right away, we're off on a bad footing here, because, you know, I don't hate you, but think about it, man. I didn't ask for your damn advice. And I wouldn't ask for your bloody advice, because I don't want to do it how you do it. And this assumption that somehow everybody does it's that's the problem when you assume, right? You try to put your idea in other people's heads, and it never works. People can't stop trying it though.
Right. Well, skateboarding and skateboarding light, which is snowboard, the thing is that you're actually living life.
Yeah.
So when someone's telling you advice for how you should live your life, how you should do anything,
And that's not just me, man.
Yeah.
You hit onto a good point. That's skateboarding. You know, all you pedestrians been telling us we're wrong forever.
yes,
We know we're not wrong. You're wrong.
yep,
Maybe nobody's wrong, but it's not your position to tell me.
No.
I'm not trying to tell you shouldn't be walking around like a
exactly,
prehistoric, you know what I'm saying?
yes,
I'm not telling you any of that, so why are you trying to get in my business?
Right.
You know what I mean? And so part of my little, you know, PD's attitude, watch out, man, he's going to unload on you. Well, I don't think that's just me. I just think I'm a skateboarder, and that's how we are. And you can't treat us like shit and then try to offer us advice. It's not going to work, you know?
you
You're
can't
not gonna
come in
win.
with the hierarchy of like a Hollywood star is better than a blah 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 blah
You
blah.
can't do the
Yeah,
condescending
yeah.
trip.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
we don't want unsolicited advice, and we don't respond well to threats. So either one of those is going to lead to a cul-de-sac, you know what I'm saying?
That is the quote of the show, man.
Well, no, I'm just saying, what people don't, and I want to just assert this because I think it's important, is that as many people as I've had to kick out of the store, or somehow felt obliged to kick out of the store, or shut them down, or whatever it is, tune them up,
Yeah.
whatever the deal is, I hope that people would understand that the flip side of that is I actually sincerely really do appreciate people's support. You know what I mean? And I understand that me without everybody's supporting we wouldn't be sitting here talking, this wouldn't be happening. I wouldn't have the opportunity to create this little museum. I wouldn't have the opportunity to keep this little shop and this little brand going. None of that would be available without people. So I'm completely conscious of that at all times. You know, I have to be, because really there's no point in doing any of it just for myself, you know?
Right.
So
It's a living, like on some level, it's a living.
I'm like the most lucky dude on the planet, because the stuff that I love is what keeps me, keeps me going.
I think the first conversation I had with you after being kicked out of the shop was like 10 years later, 20 years later, 1993. I came in and I was like, the hazing, it's a gatekeeping thing. Yeah, it's not a bully thing.
No.
Because
we
on
talked
the
about that.
other
I've
side,
had conversations with other people about this too.
Yes.
You know who Marshall McLuhan was?
I know the name.
Yeah, his catchphrase was "the medium is the message," and his book was "Understanding Media." And back in the 70s, he was an interesting cat because he was very forward-thinking. And one of his ideas was, among many, was humans have shifted the brunt of our work onto machines, our physical labor. And he said that in the future, he called it the electronic revolution. We'd call it now, we know it as the digital revolution. But he said in the future, people are going to be shifting their nervous systems onto machines. And if you look at all of this culture, you got some really sensitive people running around because they've all uploaded their nervous systems onto machines, right?
Absolutely.
So this guy was like so far ahead of the curve, it was just ridiculous.
I got to read that. Yeah.
And anyway, my point with all that is just that we need to be sensitive to things that are going on around in our environment, and skateboarders, I think, and snowboarders generally are, you know, but to a point, you know what I mean? One of the things about creating this whole world that we're sitting in here, this all had to be created by people.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get caught up into squishy feelings too much. You have to be aware that, you know, people have feelings, all this shit, but at the same time you have to have this mindset of like, my trip is to manifest things into being that haven't existed before. And sometimes that intensity of creating a skateboard trick, creating a whole new way of using an alpine, sometimes that intensity of actually having something appear in your imagination, willing it into being, manifestation, it's a powerful trip. But it sometimes gets confused with, that dude's a fucking dick. You know? And maybe he's not, or she's not trying to be a dick.
Right.
They're just on this thing of like, I'm on this mission, man, and I don't have time for your bullshit. Do you know what I mean? And that's seen as insensitive, and I get that, especially in a sensitive world, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, yes.
But we can't help being who we are at the end of the day. And I think a lot of us that are, I never am comfortable, you know, maybe some people would recognize what we do as innovative, but I don't see it as that. I just see it as a natural way to live. And if that means manifesting things into being that didn't exist before, it's a powerful, rewarding experience, man. You know, I would recommend that anybody who has the opportunity to be part of it should be. But, like I said, one of the side effects is you might get kicked out of the store for being a knob.
Or get
because I got no time for that shit. I'm on a mission, man.
Yeah.
I'm on
your pad's thrown in the river
right
at
now.
Saline. You might get beat down and told to fuck off. We don't care that you've got a nice skateboard here. Go fuck yourself. Like, you need to get through. And one of the points that, you know, it's just kind of a confluence of information in my brain and processing. It's like, you came from, I tried to say it last night, you came from a highly masculine, like you were not allowed to act feminine in any way.
Yeah, that's incorrect. But I mean, I like that that's your perception, but it's not.
And I'm not putting it on you. I'm saying the
I'm
generation
just,
manly men.
A lot of people didn't, if you weren't there in the infancy of punk rock, for example.
Right.
See, punk rock didn't start as what it turned into.
Right.
See, punk rock started as there were gay people, there were girls.
Yes.
Everybody was in punk rock at the start.
Yes.
Same way everybody's welcome into skateboarding. It might not be a friendly welcome, but you're all welcome.
Right.
Right. And the same with snowboarding. So, but that's funny. I mean, I'm not trying to sort of dispute what you're saying, because I think there is a lot of rah in it. But my experience was that through punk rock, when it first started, it was super wide open for interpretation. But then it turned into this.
Yes.
And studs and leather jackets.
Yes.
It became a uniform. It became a thing.
Yeah.
But that's not what it started as.
No.
But I understand what you're saying. There is this sort of masculinity, but not really, because when I started my in 1973 or 4, my little sister, 2 years younger than me, she started skating at the same time. So.
Totally. Well, what I was beginning to say is that to an outsider looking in, it looks brutal, like a real masculine thing.
Yeah.
But and you might
and what you said about the bullying.
You might not be able to get through to it because you're so sensitive.
Yeah.
Somebody says, "Get the fuck out of here."
Yeah.
And you're not the guy who's going to come back. Okay, well, I'll come back when you're not here and try and learn this on my own.
Yeah.
When you punch through that brutalness to get into the community, there's such a high level integration of feminine energy as far as nurturing,
but you're right, you
loving.
gotta get past the gate.
Yeah, you can't get in without being you can't. It's designed to pull out posers. It's designed to pull out people that are coming in to fuck with it.
Here's what I think is that, and I like your sort of observation about, and I've you and I maybe, and I've definitely discussed this with other people. It gets again, it's down. It's part of it is this sensitivity that we have.
Yes.
And sensitive doesn't mean pussy. Sensitive just means you pay attention to a lot, and not a lot gets by you. You know.
Right.
So there's a bit of a misinterpretation sometimes of what sensitive is. Anyway, get to the point. There's a system that's been developed in skateboarding, and I imagine it exists to some degree in snowboarding. Sorry, this is supposed to be mostly about snowboarding.
It's okay. We've hit a lot of good snowboard stuff. Yeah.
When I showed up at the spot, all the bigger, tougher, stronger, more experienced dudes ruled the spot. That's the way it is. There's no arguing with it. To an outsider, it would look like bullying. It's not. What it is, and I do this to kids to this day, and you know, I started as being that kid who couldn't hang. They're not going to let you just come in and fuck up their session. They're not going to let you come in and just stomp on their lines. They're just not. For the simple reason that that's that dude's line. You can't stomp on it. That's the first thing. But the second is what you said about hazing. You got to be tested first. Nobody's going to take a bunch of energy and love and time and put it into some fuckhead who's insincere. So that beat down it's skateboarding is handed down as an unofficial mentorship. It always has been. But you don't just roll in and get a fucking mentor. You got to be sizzled, and that's part of the process. And if you can hang with the sizzle, sit down, shut the fuck up, stay out of everybody's way, and pay attention, look at the flow, somebody's going to come in and take you under their wing. But they're not. You can't just get that for showing up. And it's a weird thing, because at the modern skate park or skate spot environment, there's this people who don't get that because they're caught up in the sensitivity of shit.
Yeah.
They're confused, and they're like, oh, claim your space. And you can claim your space, homeboy, homegirl. I'm not mad at you, but if you get on my line, I'm going to flatten you. And I'm not intentionally going to flatten you, but I'm not going to try and fucking avoid you and break my ankle. You're going to be my landing cushion. So
most of the time,
the same way I was smashed.
Yes.
That's just how it is. You can like it, you can hate it, but you're not going to change it. So
right.
You're just not.
Most of the time, you're dealing with a second party there. So you're like, hey, mom, this kid is just in the middle of nowhere. And then the mom's speaking off, this is a public park and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And you go, oh my God, I'm not dealing with the right people. Superhuman Ben Ladouceur watched the shop while we did this interview in the Pop Culture Museum out back. So when he let us know it was time to take care of business, we took a quick break. Now back to the show. It was Tex Davenport from Baker. He's like, why you got to do it? Like, why you got to call it FNRad? Like,
fuck Christians, man. You don't run me. I run you, motherfucker.
Yeah, no, he was just like, that's too on the nose. It's like the overuse of shitty, like,
oh, I see.
Make it something
I thought
cool.
He was trying to preach at you.
No, he was close friends with Craig, and so when I came out of the gate in the first 2 seasons of this, I anchored it to Craig Kelly. So
okay.
I would call people and say, you know what, I'm doing a podcast show, and they'd be like, well, what are you talking about? I'm like, did you know Craig? And they'd be like, oh, fuck, let me tell you Craig's story. Cool. And I lucked out and met Jeff Fulton out of Baker. I just saw him riding down the hill. And that's what feels good about being an authentic person in these sports, is when you just go somewhere and then you go, that guy knows what he's doing. You can just see it. Yeah. You're like, holy shit, that's TA. Like TA's skating Whistler.
Yeah.
Like some kid that is into it, that doesn't have any history, would see TA skate and go, that guy is fucking insane. Who is that?
Who's that old gentleman?
Yeah, who is that guy that has so much style and is such a pleasure to watch?
He's flowing like a big afro in a convertible. Where'd he get that from?
Yeah, so where did we just stop? There was an entry point.
We were talking about gatekeeping and skateboarding and all that. So we probably should get back onto snowboarding now.
Yeah, for sure. So, like, was there a bitter taste in your mouth with snowboarding at some point? I mean, it started.
Yeah,
with
it was more. I mean, if there's something I dislike about skateboarding or anything else, it's this, and I'm guilty of it myself. But it's the monetary trip. It's this idea that nothing has any value unless you can attach some kind of monetary measurement to it.
Yes.
And snowboarding seemed more so than skateboarding.
Absolutely.
As far as the washout factor, do you know what I mean?
We started by asking people, you'd see someone snowboard, you'd be like, are you sponsored? Like, we were already in that mindset. Yeah.
The arc of Crystal Ocean Snowboards was kind of an interesting one. We started, we did a 15-year run, 83 till 98. We put out a couple little releases here and there, but basically that was our run.
Yeah.
And the reason I didn't keep going with it is because it turned into a big corporate pile of shit that I wanted to have nothing to do with. So the arc was, first 5 years, crazy amount of work just to sell a board. We're still having a demo boards. We're having, you know what I mean? You can't, people aren't coming in and asking for
them. That's 83
we're
to 88.
We're pushing them on to people. We're like, this is the shit. You got to try this.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of work to sell something that the markup is not that great in to begin with. And so the middle years was gold in the middle 5. First 5 was shitload of work with very little payoff.
Yeah. The
middle 5 was just gold. Like, okay, we've got 2 established brands. We got Skull Skates. We got Crystal Ocean. We're innovating. We're making good stuff. We're hooked up with good manufacturers, and it's all working. The graphics look cool. You know, it's all happening. The last 5 was trying to fend off competitors and all these knobs that just wanted to grab a piece of something that they had nothing to do with, right? I'm not going to mention names, but we all know that there's players in the industry that just came in and basically fucked it up, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm one of those people, like, if my passion takes me there, I'm 110%. But if I get the feeling that it's done, there's no point in flogging a dead horse, man. I'm out. Right. So that's what happened with snowboarding for me. What's interesting is that even though, and I've been able to compartmentalize in many ways, like when I got out of snowboarding, I hated the business side of it. Hate's a strong word. Let's just say I disliked it. But my personal relationship to it is that I never stopped loving snowboarding, which is obviously why this is happening right now.
Yeah.
To a point where, okay, well, why? And that's, I even had people ask, since people had heard this was going to happen and now it's up. Do you guys make snowboards? No. Why are you doing a snowboard exhibit? Because snowboarding's fucking rad. Like, why does there always have to be some financial gain in everything? I don't think there does have to be. You know, I have an awesome day job. designing and selling skateboards and all the crap that we put our logo on. I should say quality merchandise. No, anyway, whatever. You know, I have a regular job. That affords me enough time to just do things that are awesome, that are like passion projects, you know? And so I'm not saying we'd never make a snowboard again, but I mean, that's definitely not the reason we did this snowboard exhibit. It was more like, this is an interesting culture that people outside of snowboarding would find to be, you know, something that they'd want to learn about. And also, if you look around the room, it is. I mean, you look at all this stuff, and yeah, it's just stuff at the end of the day, but it's stuff that illustrates. When I look at a board, and I can't say for other people, but when I look at a board, any of these boards, my brain just goes right to what snowboarding was like at that time. So it's not the stuff that holds any importance, it's the feelings around the stuff, you know, that are important. And also, the obvious thing for a lot of people as well, old guys love this old stuff because it takes them back. And that's absolutely true. But it's more than that, because we get tons of people that are kids or that don't snowboard at all. And you can see they're not going back, but they're going somewhere else. Maybe it's sideways. They're going somewhere else. Do you know what I'm saying? Because they look at this shit and their imagination starts firing up, and they're like, yeah, like, whoa, what's that? How come those are so bright? And like, what's the deal with these shapes? And whatever it is that they're thinking, it's taking them kind of mentally into sort of another dimension, you know? And so, without trying to sound too cosmic, I mean, I just think that there's a value in that. Like, I'm a guy who's collected a lot of stuff over the years, and I've always had this kind of uneasy, weird relationship to the stuff. Because I have an uneasy, weird relationship to life, let's be honest. But, you know, I had to just come to terms with it and go, yeah, it's not the stuff at all. It's the feeling around the stuff that's important, you know?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, and that's a big deal for me, is having this space here and being able to share all these things. Because otherwise, I'm just some foamy at the mouth collector dude, or I'm some pack rat hoarder dude, or you know. Now I'm a curator. Curator sounds way more fancy.
Well, let me add one more dimension. I come out here. Ben's your friend, and he's told me this is going to happen. And he's
we got to talk about Ben too, by the way.
But yes, and Ben has helped with a lot of some of these are his things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I come in here, and I see the Sims Lonnie Toft. It makes me think of Trent Bush, who just sent me a photo of that board from that picture. He got it for his collection.
Cool.
That board, not another one.
The board.
Cab's board.
Yeah, cool.
And then as I'm going along, I see your skull skates, and I'm like, that shape looks very Chuck-like. So now I'm thinking about Chuck. I see the winter stick. Right. I'm thinking about Dmitry Milovich.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the Sims boards. Of course, it's Tom, but it's also Scott Klum.
Tom takes a lot of heat, man, but we all love Tom.
Love him to pieces, of course. Yeah. Tom invented the snowboarder. Nobody invented the snowboard, just one person, but he invented what it meant to be a professional snowboarder.
Yeah, of course he
that
did.
Early team was everything that everyone wanted to be. And as we go along, David Kemper, also Jamie Salter. Snowtech is Ernie DeLost, who says hello, by the way.
Awesome.
You know, Storm is DeFern.
Barfoot too.
Yep, Barfoot. You got Chucky. That avalanche made me think of Dave Hatchett. He's got one in his place.
Damien, Chris,
Beverly. Like, these are people. These are connections to real. Yes, exactly.
I mean, these are all, and when you know, again, I think this is just how my sort of minuscule brain works. Is that, hey man, I love. Who's the guy that you said when you first got into it? The Burton guy that was like the most famous snowboarder guy.
Oh, Craig Kelly.
Craig Kelly.
Yes.
So, I love that dude, but to me, and again, it's just my interpretation of it. He's not the most important dude in snowboarding to me. To me, the most important dude is the underdog guy, the guy that didn't get his due and didn't get his and because they weren't looking for it. That's
Carter
the other
Turk,
thing.
I've had them on the show.
Yeah,
Carter Turk,
they
Nick
weren't looking
Parada,
for
these
it.
guys that were ripping, and that if you put a camera on them, Sean Farmer was one of those guys. He loved the camera, but he would, and Damian Sanders, they would be riding with or without the camera. They weren't there to get famous or to get in magazines or to make money. They were there because this is all they could think about.
Yeah.
Like, fuck, I hope that it snows so that 30-foot cornice at Hemlock
Yeah, that's all that you care about.
is there. Oh, really? Why? Because are you going to put together you're going to make an Instagram reel of the ride up? No, you're doing it because
you got it.
It caught you. It caught you. And I asked Blaze Rosenthal on tape, would you call it an addiction? And he said, no, an obsession, because addiction seems negative.
Right.
But in what you've been talking about, it's addiction adjacent. That's why drugs come into it sometimes, or not
Right.
why. It's like there's a similar feeling to blowing off going to high school so that you can go jump off a cornice and risk your life, as blowing off hanging out with your buddies
I
who
just think
aren't
it gets
into
back to what I was saying about people looking for that. Where is the edge
Where's the
of
edge,
reality?
yes.
You know, the
Yeah.
edge of life. And there's a lot of ways you can go explore that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some of it is through negative addictive kind of behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Other is through more positive addictive behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever, you know, it's just, we tend to be those kind of people that, how do I put it into words? It's not like you're never satisfied. You're absolutely satisfied at different points. But that accomplishment that you made today, that's what I did today, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's not of any value, but like, what are you doing? Or if that's what I did yesterday, for example, what am I doing today?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's
You
more
don't
like that.
rest on it. Yeah.
Yeah, like, and so people who want to explore in that way, they find different ways to explore it, you know. And so, if you didn't know any better, you'd think, oh man, skateboarders, snowboarders, what a bunch of deviant scumbags. But they're not seeing the whole picture. That's oversimplification of it, you know.
Yes. Yeah. Well, a lot of times, and this is another philosophical thought that came from doing the show, you'll see something, let's take it out of this realm. You see the Sistine Chapel, and you go, wow, I wish I was as talented as that I could paint that. But if you're actually talking about it, you would have had to start painting with great teachers at 3 years old, been torn from your family, do it your whole life, and then spend all this time on your back up there doing this thing. So like when we look at it, let's pick Damien going off a cliff. You go, I wish I could do that. But what that is, what you're seeing, is the proof that Damien lived all that time practicing and doing the things
You don't pull that shit out of your ass.
to get to where he could jump off a fucking 100-foot cliff. It's proof of life. And it doesn't matter whether it's the slam dunk at the last second in the NBA big game or whatever, or the slap shot. Those are proof of life. You don't get to come in and pretend to be a snowboarder. You just don't. You don't get to come in and pretend to be a skater. Because skating, it'll knock you out. It'll knock you out. The guys that are there will kick you out of the place. It's so authentic that you can't pretend it. You can't.
For some people, that's their out. They're like, I never stop falling down. I'm out, man.
I'm out, yeah.
But what they're not getting is the subtle intricacies of it. Is like, you're not going to stop falling down, but guess what? You're going to get way better at falling down.
Yeah.
And for some people, that's like, no. There's too much. I got to pay too much. That's too expensive. I don't want to pay that. I don't want to pay in flesh.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, flesh heals back, right?
Yeah. It's the only currency that's real.
And the more you gouge
right.
yourself,
yeah.
the more adept and the better your body becomes at healing itself. And to me, what a beautiful and incredible side effect of thrashing yourself is learning to heal yourself, you know, and it's an incredible thing.
Yeah, I think we could actually end it there. What do you think? I mean, there's so much more we could talk about, but I feel
no, that was fun, man. Thank you.
Like I've had, it's been an honor, and it's been really nice.
Can I do a pitch? Can I do the pitch at the end here?
100%.
Just that this has been a big deal for us, getting this little space here. It all came out of exhibit that we had done years ago at the invite of the Vancouver Museum. It was called Skateboarding Vancouver. It was about the history of skateboarding in Vancouver. It was set for 6 months. It got extended to 12 months. It got extended to 18 months. It set all kinds of attendance records at the museum. They got all these people in that never had come in before. We learned that all kinds of people who will never touch a skateboard in their life were very interested in the culture. That began several years of negotiation with the city of Vancouver trying to collaborate on a pop culture museum. When I could see that it wasn't going to probably go anywhere, we then initiated about a 10-year search, and unfortunately we can't afford to do it in the city, so it ended up, we searched all over the Vancouver Island and all over the Sunshine Coast just outside of Vancouver, and finally got this space. And so it's kind of an awesome deal for us because it's that way to, if you piss me off, I still might kick you out of the store, but on the bigger picture, I want to share this. This has a value, this culture, to me, and more so that, you know, coming out of skateboarding and snowboarding too, that thing of, no, you're not welcome here. What you're doing is wrong. Well, you know, that backfires, man, because when people that I know and people like me, you tell us not to do something, it's not going to work, man. We're going to just do it twice as much, you know. And so part of this little museum is a way to highlight the misfits, you know what I'm saying? The island of misfit toys, you know, like we come to these activities oftentimes because we just don't fit anywhere else. And so to have a little space like this where, and I'm not, hey man, there's nothing on me at all, or I think most people who do this kind of stuff, this feeling that we have to validate ourselves at all. In fact, it's just the opposite. We're going to do this. We don't care what you think. But for our people that are on the same wavelength and have the same kind of experiences and the same kind of interests, there's something about creating this little space to share this all that's kind of magical, you know. So we're pretty stoked to have it all going.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah.
If you get to Qualicum Beach, come visit us because we got a lot of neat stuff planned for this space.
And if you're going to Whistler, listeners of the show are from all over the world. If you're coming to the Pacific Northwest and you're going to ride Baker or Whistler, or you're just in Vancouver and you're going to ride the local mountains, get on a flight. You can come over here and make a day trip to come see this thing.
And it's an awesome little town.
And it's super worth it. Like I got chills when I was coming in. I'm looking at I came at the right time too. It was like the Midnight Madness. There's people all over
tons of people. Yeah.
And it just was like such a special event to be able to come in. And then, like I said, I'm seeing all my friends, the things that they're talking about. Yeah. And Ken was the first, I've said it before, Ken Ock, when I left his house, he's like, best thing about today, I made a friend. And in my heart of hearts, I didn't like myself enough that I was like, we're not friends. You know what I mean? Like, how could we be friends? You don't know me. I don't know you.
That's awesome.
But over the course of 8 years of doing the show, I've realized every time I sit with someone like yourself,
right,
there's a friendship there that's it. For the rest of our lives, we're going to have had these hours together. So awesome.
Yeah,
and every time I see
it's another one of those
great.
side effects of being so determined to just do your trip, that eventually you're just going to bump into people on that same wavelength. And it's hard not to, you know, have a heartfelt connection with people like that.
Authenticity, which just keeps going through the whole thing. It's like that's real life is not being fake about something, not having an agenda, not coming in here going, you know, that was when I was a kid getting kicked out. It was right, because I was like, this brand made it through where a lot of other brands haven't.
Yeah.
There's some real, like, this guy doesn't know the value he's sitting on. He's got gold, I say. He should be, you know, you're not capitalizing on all your gold. And it's like, I was just a naive young kid.
But dude, you got to understand throughout all of this, we don't know what the fuck we're doing.
Sure, right.
No, I'm serious.
Right.
Like, we're making it up every day as we go.
Right.
And this idea that we've had this incredible fortune and luck to have people support us over all this time. I always say we, man, because it's never been just me. I've always been surrounded by incredible people, either whether it be the people that produce my product, you know, or the people that we support through sponsorship, or the people that come into the store and buy the stuff or go to our website, skullskates.com. Anyway, no, it's that it's a community thing, and that's what all this shit is. You can't, you can, but it just won't pan in the long run. This idea that I'm me and this is my thing, and it's not my thing. It's at the end of the day, I have the keys to this building and other people don't, but that's just a ridiculous minor detail,
Uh-oh, somebody's...
Yeah, I'll be right there, man. The check's in the mail, bro. I swear.
Big love, PD. Thank you for all
Thanks,
that you've
man.
done,
Really
dude.
appreciate it.
And all you continue to do.
Yeah, and you too, man. I love
Thanks.
it, man. It's cool.
It's where I live.
Okay, we're stroking each other now. This gets Hollywood. Thanks, man. That was fun.
FNRad shoutouts this week to PD and Rachel. Thank you very much for letting me film in your stores. PD, thanks so much for sitting down with me in your Pop Culture Museum for an interview about all things snowboarding. Extra special thanks to Ben Ladoucier, who helped curate the Pop Culture Museum's Vintage Snowboard Show. Hell, he helped build the displays and contributed boards from his own collection. Ben also invited me over to Qualicum, drove me around, and let me stay at his house. So special thanks to Ben's whole family. If you're looking for a special trip to go on, fly into Qualicum Beach from Vancouver on Isqueo Air and visit the Pop Culture Museum. You'll be stoked. And be sure to come back next week for another episode of the FNRad Snowboard Podcast, presented by Vans and brought to you by SIA Productions.